印度国防杂志力量的主编在听了米尔斯海默出席印度某论坛时所做的发言后，结合自己的认知，对米尔斯海默的观点进行了阐述。印度和北方邻国交手胜算到底有多少？俄罗斯和谁的关系更亲密？主编一一给出了自己的判断，我们听听他是怎么说的吧。
The second question that the professor was asked is that in his assessment, will China attack Taiwan? And if it happens, what will be India's role in that war in support of America? And the professor said that China will not attack Taiwan, and this is a very correct and a logical thing, notwithstanding the fact what the American analysts keep talking, or their military officers serving or retired talk. They've even given a deadline of 2027. This will not happen. Now the professor gives two reasons why it will not happen. Let us discuss his reasons. He says the first is that amphibious operations, doing operations across a water body, they are very difficult. That's a very valid reason. So for PLA Navy, it will be a very difficult operation, an amphibious operation. So unless they are compelled, they are unlikely to do that. And the second reason that the professor gives it, that the PLA has not fought a war since last it fought was in 1979. Whereas the US military during the unipolar moment, it has been fighting wars all over the world. And therefore, the American military war machine is well oiled. Now, here I have a difference of opinion with the professor. I think the key reason why two great powers will not go to war, a direct war, which is US military and China, the reason is that neither side will be assured of any degree of war control to accomplish their war objectives. Now, if you are not assured of a certain desired war control, why would you go to war? It becomes meaningless. And the reason why they will not be confident, both sides, of a war control is because what we'll be looking at is an entirely different war the world has not seen between two great powers. And in this war, what will be different is, at all the three levels of war, which is the strategic level, the highest level, the operational level of war, and the tactical level of war, the PLA has an asymmetrical warfare, an asymmetrical thinking. Now, the PLA thinking at the strategic level is, they have a thinking of cognitive confrontation. That means you attack directly the political leadership, and that will be done through their cyber capability. If they do lots of cyber attacks, that is loosely called then the cyber war, which brings the entire civilian life to a standstill. And the second element is their counter space capabilities, which are huge. In fact, both these things, the cyber and the counter space, he has elevated and told the PLA as the commander-in-chief of his military that they should be elevated to the strategic level. And the Americans are aware of that, because the Americans also have good cyber capabilities, comparable cyber capabilities, and given the huge counter space capabilities of the PLA, they have recently raised a space force. So this is what will happen at the strategic level. Now at the operational level of war, once again the PLA has a doctrine which they call a systems destruction warfare. That means you are not really looking at attrition. You're not looking at destroying a tank to a tank, a gun to a gun, or you're not doing all this. What you're looking at is how to deny, disrupt and destroy the communication of the other side. And both have the capability, both great powers. As far as PLA is concerned, they have two organizations which will do this. One is what they call the Strategic Support Force. It has under it cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, which is where electronic warfare is done, and it has space. So these three domains come under the strategic support force, which is the non-kinetic element for disruption of communication. As far as the kinetic element of disruption is concerned, it is that organization called Rocket Force, where the Chinese have perhaps the largest inventory of land-based missile with any great power, and specific to the US military, something that US military does not have in their inventory yet, the PLA has hypersonic glide vehicles and hypersonic cruise missiles. Now, even at the tactical level, again it is asymmetrical, because the US military, their thinking is, or their doctrine is, to have a joint force. And what they have is a mission command. That means a directive style of command. The lowest commander, to accomplish a tactical objective, he is given freedom to do things as he wants, so long as the task is done. That is a directive style of command, which is not the case with the PLA. Perhaps when the professor said that they have not fought, the PLA has not fought a war since 1979, he was referring to this aspect. Because what the PLA has done is, unlike having a joint force, what the adversary has, they have what is called a joint integrated operations, and they look at mission sets. Mission set is a strike force which is temporarily created, and it is mission specific. This is what the PLA does. So the point here is that if at the conventional level, two great powers are not very assured of a desirable war control, then things can only escalate to the next level, and the next level is the nuclear level. That is where both sides today have a nuclear deterrence, and both sides know that things will escalate to an extent where it will be devastating. We'll see devastation in the world. So this is the reason they will not fight. And the third reason why the Chinese will not fight with Taiwanese unless provoked is that it starts to logic, why will a Chinese fight with a Chinese? They both are Chinese. So there is no reason really, unless there is a compellence to do so. So this are the three basic reasons why China will not attack Taiwan. Now the second part of the question is, is what will be India's role in case of a war over Taiwan? The professor said that India will have an indirect support role. Let me amplify the indirect support role. There are three things that India is likely to do. As rightly pointed out by the professor, India will certainly not get into a direct war with the Chinese over Taiwan. But there are three things it can do. One is, it already has a shipyard agreement with the Americans, and perhaps even now extended to the Quad navies, because of which the Indian shipyards and the Indian bases will be available to the US naval vessels. So that is one advantage that the Americans can have. The second advantage is that, as we are aware, India's focus is on the Indian Ocean region, where it wants to be a net security provider. And today, after having signed the 4 foundation agreements, military agreements of the US military, it also has now a combat role to play here. So it can play a combat role supported fully by the US military, and that role would be a maritime blockade of Chinese commercial trade, a huge trade that passes through the Indian Ocean region, something to the tune of $4 trillion annually. And the third role is what we have seen recently in the Gaza war, that the 5th Fleet of the Americans, which is based in Bahrain, if it wants to join the war in Taiwan, then the Indian naval ships, they can help escort them in their area of responsibility as being the net security provider. So these are the big three things. The point is, but can India do this is the question. Now, it will be argued by a lot of naval officers that, look, Today we have a lot of bases on the way. We have a better operational turnaround for the fuel, so we have longer legs. But what nobody will talk about is that we have very limited ocean going ships. Our capabilities are limited. So the point I am making is, honestly, India will have no role at all. Whatever the professor may say or what the Americans may be thinking, except for providing them bases through the shipyard agreement, it will stay away from unnecessarily provoking China. The third question that the professor was asked is that in case of an India-China war, will Russia support India? And he said that Russia will stay neutral in a war between India and China. But if push comes to shove, then Russia will support China rather than India because Russia has closer ties with China. Now, my take is a bit different on this. I believe that there is such a huge mismatch between the PLA capabilities and the capability of the Indian military that a decisive war on Chinese terms will start and finish at the strategic and the operational level itself. It will not come down to the tactical level, which is the strength of the Indian military, which is where the Indian Air Force and the Indian Army fights. Because if you see the capabilities, as I said, the asymmetrical capabilities of the PLA, Indian military has no answer to the PLA strategic support force, to the PLA rocket force, to their bombers, to the huge inventory of varied drones, to the directed energy weapons. India simply has no answer. And when we look at the airborne forces, today the PLA has in excess of 100,000 airborne troops, and India actually has a very measly amount of airborne forces, which is less than a brigade. I would put it at about 2,000 or 2,500 airborne troops. So what is the comparison between 2,500 and over 100,000 troops? So as far as Russia is concerned, while Russia will not deny an operational support role to India, it will be happy to give India the spare parts, it will be happy to give what India wants in a war with China, knowing fully well that it will not affect PLA's campaign at all. Thank you.